Professor Goldfarb, and thank you for your wonderful talk. And I'm wondering whether you would be concerned about AI's impact on the labor market, especially on the low-skilled and middle-skilled workers.
Great question. Yes and no. Okay, so in the what do I mean by that? Disruptive technology any technology that's going to transform industries is going to lead to almost by definition disruption. Means some people are going to win and some people are going to lose. I think with AI, more people are going to win than lose, but that's not to say that the people who are left behind, we should just ignore them. So like, I am worried in that sense. But I'm optimistic about high skilled versus low skilled, more optimistic than I would, than you'd think given what happened in computing. Over the past 40 years in the US labor market and Europe, so I don't know what's happened in the Chinese labor market the same way, but in the US market and European market, we've seen an increase in inequality, largely due to technology. So the internet and computers, in order to get a productivity gain, labor productivity from those things, you need to have skills, particularly you need to be relatively well educated. And we've seen what we call skill bias technical change. David Otter is the leading scholar in this area and sort of developed a lot of the work. And he showed that as the previous two generations of information technology diffused, it's been great for people who are high skilled and not so good for people who are less skilled, especially the middle income. So we've seen an increased inequality. So that's where I think your starting point. I think there's reasons to be optimistic that prediction machines are doing are largely automating the work of people who currently are at the top of the income scale. Okay. And so if you think about medical diagnosis, for example, doctors do pretty well. And if a core part of their workflow gets automated, that's not going to be good for doctors. And that's the point, but it might be good for inequality. Okay. What do I mean by that? In the US, there's hundreds of thousands of doctors, but there's millions of medical professionals, nurses, pharmacists, medical assistants, social workers, and others. And one thing that doctors do as part of their workflow that no one else really has the skill of or the ability to do is diagnosis, is prediction. But if we have machines that can do prediction and we build some training programs to help nurses and pharmacists and others leverage those prediction tools, what we can think of as upskilling millions and millions of workers to be able to serve, so increase their marginal productivity, increase their wages, and increase their ability to help people and deliver better healthcare. That, to be clear, that's at the cost of a smaller number of people whose job opportunities are going to be diminished. And so so it's there's going to be winners and losers. Don't ignore the losers, but I'm optimistic that that the current generation of AI prediction tools, a lot of the winners are going to be people who we currently think of as low skilled, because we shouldn't be thinking of them as low skilled. We should be thinking of there's a constraint on their ability to leverage their skills in the marketplace. And so I did it with diagnosis. ChatGPT is another example of this. And where those of us who make a living writing, we see what ChatGPT can do and you think, there's now a machine that can write. That was inherently human. That was a skill. I make a good living off writing. I'm not so thrilled about a machine that can do that. But there are many more people whose job opportunities are constrained by their inability to. What do I mean by that? There was this story, and I don't know how, I can't verify the veracity of the story, but there was a story on Twitter of a landscaper who was a good landscaper, but was a terrible writer and didn't know how to write a customer service email like, "Hi, Mrs. Chen, I'm going to be at your house Wednesday to work in your garden. Thank you." He didn't know how to write that email, and he had a hard time getting business. And somebody helped him build a tool that could automate his writing. using the underlying technology for ChatGPT. And that enabled this person to get a lot more business. That's one example. Who knows? It's an empirical question whether it'll scale, and we won't know for a while. But it's an example of when one person's automation is another's augmentation. And prediction machines seem to be automating the skills. Maybe this is what people are worried about, but the skills of the people who already make a really good living. And in the process, they might be augmenting the people who we currently think of as low skilled, because their bottleneck to really delivering the value they can in the workplace has to do with writing or other things that machines can do.
Hi, Avi.
Hi.
Yeah, I just want to follow up with what you said. I think it's interesting direction to follow even for the academics and of course for the general public. So I think all earlier automations, people have realized that it's not really increasing the unemployment or stuff like that. But when AI came, a lot of people came worried, right? And it's like it's a hypothesis. And now you seems to be more optimistic than a lot of other, including David. And I think there could be good reasons, as you claimed in your presentation. If it can change a lot of amateur to become professionals, maybe that really makes them competitive. At least maybe it could reduce the gap between them and the high powers. But that's another hypothesis. So I think it's really interesting to follow what's going on this.
Right, and David and I have an ongoing debate on this very topic. So, okay, so there's a thing model-wise, got to take a step back. So there's two reasons why we've seen increasing inequality over the last 40 years in the US. Sort of stopped relatively recently, but there's two broad forces. One has been skill bias technical change, which is differences in labor income between people who are educated and people who are not. And that's actually the force I'm talking about. There's another force which is related to capital labor share, that more and more of the economy of GDP is from capital, and that leads to inequality as well. And actually, there's reasons to be very pessimistic about AI because it's capital, okay, and it takes a lot of capital. So my optimism is very much about labor share and not about capital. Capital tends to be about the 1% versus the 99% is capital, and that the top 10 versus the 90 is more labor. Now, David's work in the 80s and 90s showed quite convincingly that David Otter, that increasing inequality was because of the automation of what middle income people were doing through, especially in factories, through what we called robots, but these were not intelligent machines. They were, automated processes within factories and a few other places too. Same thing happened, there's a different process that happened in office work where the fact that all of us have our own computer replaced typing pools and replaced a whole bunch of what we used to call pink collar jobs. Okay. Now, so one version of the story, and this is where David's coming from typically, is that AI looks like information technology. And we know that information technology is skill bias, so why would AI be any different? Where Jay Joshua and I are coming from in this topic is to say, well, it is different. If you actually listen to David's frequent co-author, Doron Acemoglu, when he talks about what AI can do, it's about automating particular skills that the high-waged humans have. And Doron argues that that's bad. We don't want to automate the things that high-waged humans do. And Eric Brynjolfsson's arguing something similar. And this all goes back to John Markov's book, Machines of Loving Grace, talking about the differences between augmentation and automation. And what we're arguing, we're going to have a piece coming out on this soon, is that one person, first, there's no real such thing as augmentation. One person's automation is another's augmentation and vice versa. And so the real question is, which humans is the technology going to substitute for, and which humans is the technology going to complement? And the optimism comes from a hypothesis, not proven, to your point. Like, we need data. Like, please, some of you, get some data. Okay. Start analyzing it. But a hypothesis that these technologies are about automating processes at the top end of the wage scale. So it'll automate them and augment the rest of the population of the process. But it's, let me be clear, what we're arguing is hypothesis, and what Daron and David and Eric are arguing is hypothesis. It's too soon. We don't have data yet.
Yeah, so a lot of the interpretation so far, I think the causality is not very clear. So there are a lot of reasons. So people just go with what they're comfortable with. So we'll see. But it's really interesting, opening up new grounds to follow.
Thank you.
So it seems like nowadays what we're finding is, now that we have the technology of cheap predictions, there's a saying that when you have a hammer, everything's a nail. So we're finding more and more problems are actually prediction problems. And maybe even some of the things that we nebulously thought were judgment before is prediction, or at least at the border. So I think the question is, when does the combination of cheap prediction taking over more and more of what we think are human, we need humans for tasks, combined with human ingenuity and programming, when does that start to kind of, the combination of the two take over more and more of what we do day to day, right? So
I think ultimately you're still going to need somebody to say which prediction should you make and what should you do with them.
Well, could that be very
the real disruptive force?
The dystopian case, right?
The real disruptive force here isn't that the machines are making decisions. It's that some small number of humans can make decisions at scale. And so, so think about a machine for like AI for hiring in a workplace. Okay. Right now, most workplaces, when they do hiring, there's human resources managers on the ground who look through resumes and do interviews and then decide who to hire. And maybe eventually it goes up, further in the organization. But there's for a big company with thousands of employees, there's multiple human resources managers who are doing this interviewing. Now we have an AI that will help us predict some measure of success, okay? And someone at headquarters, maybe even one person, can say, you know what? This is what we really care about in our company. And let's build an AI that predicts whether each individual applicant, how they're going to score on that thing we care about. Okay. And so what's happened is we've moved from dozens or even hundreds of HR managers to potentially one person in the whole company making all of the decisions. And that's dystopian. So we think about, like, that might be an opportunity for the company, but when we worry about dystopian AI, as long as we're in a world of prediction machines, the worry isn't that the machines are going to start making decisions. It's that a small number of people can now make decisions that that affect everybody. And so it could lead to a massive centralization of power.